Each January, reported rates of depression spike. And among the possible causes often listed, at least in our part of the world, is that the outward circumstances of life suddenly feel pretty grim, pretty grey. The weather is often cold and wet and overcast and miserable. The excitement or anticipation of Christmas has come and gone. And even the most optimistic people who have managed to persuade themselves that it will be a case of New Year, New You, and all the rest of it, they discover in the month of January that it's a new year, but it's the same you, which can be a very frustrating thing to come to terms with. Well, the book of Philippians is a book that speaks of joy even in the face of frustrating circumstances. A joy that does not depend upon our circumstance, but endures through all circumstances. This is a good time to point out the difference between happiness and joy. Happiness comes and goes with the seasons of our lives. When things are going well, we feel happy. And when it feels like the world is just falling apart, well, our happiness flits away. But joy, according to the Bible, joy is something that exists within the hearts of God's people, even when they are surrounded with sorrow or steeped in suffering. Think of it this way. Happiness is like the flame that flickers at the top of a candle. It can be extinguished with the wind of circumstance. Joy is like the blazing beam of light that bursts forth from a lighthouse, totally untroubled by the storm that is raging below. Joy is found not in our feelings, but in the fact of what God has done for us, his people. Now, the book of Philippians is written by the Apostle Paul, and it's written from prison. And yet, when you know his circumstances here, it is all the more startling to read of just how full of joy Paul is. These opening verses speak of thankfulness and partnership in the gospel. He is confident that the one who began a good work in us will carry it on to completion. He speaks of his deep-seated love and affection for the Christians to whom he writes, and he is overflowing with praise for the living God. Paul's personal dire circumstances have not shattered his faith. In fact, far from it. And he is seeking to encourage others even as he walks through suffering. Now, we might think, well, that's just Paul's personality, isn't it? I'm not much like him. But no, actually, the insight that allowed that in Paul's mind is available to you also. Verse 12, I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me, as in my arrest, my imprisonment, has actually served to advance the gospel. As a result, it has become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I am in chains for Christ. If we were part of the early church, I think we would probably despair that this awesome evangelist has been put behind bars, has been taken out of the action. But Paul is able to see the sovereign hand of God in these circumstances. He says, how else would I have evangelized these Roman soldiers? Praise God for his providence, putting me here next to them. As part of the conditions for his arrest, Paul would have been chained to Roman soldiers as he awaited trial in front of Emperor Nero in Rome. Well, it turns out that as the soldiers come for their various shifts to be shackled to the Apostle Paul, he is proclaiming the good news to them. He has a captive audience, and it's having a massive effect. In fact, just turn to the last chapter of Philippians for a moment. In chapter 4, we are told that a number of those same soldiers, members of Caesar's household, have been saved. Paul concludes his letter saying, all God's people here send you greetings, especially those who belong to Caesar's household. Isn't that amazing? All God's people here, meaning either here in the prison or here in Rome who have come to visit me, they all send you their greetings. Oh, and especially those who have been saved among Caesar's household. That is almost certainly Caesar's private guard who will be taking shifts monitoring the Apostle Paul. I love that little detail. It is so often the case that we cannot understand our circumstances in the moment. Only looking back upon them can we see what God was doing. As Paul was arrested and transported to Rome, did he understand all that God had in store for him? Well, of course not. But it's abundantly clear now. Some may have hoped that this would have silenced Paul. Instead, it has spread the gospel to a whole new set of people. And so Paul rejoices, whether he is free or enslaved, because he knows that in reality, he is not in the hands of his circumstances. He is in the hands of his sovereign God. God calls the shots. God makes the decisions. God provides the opportunities. God blesses our efforts. And if it is true that God is totally in control, and He is, then you are where you are now by His sovereign plan, and He has you there for a purpose. If it looks like you are in a prison cell of some kind, whatever the walls around you look like, He put you there on purpose. He put you there for a purpose. There are things for you to learn. There are ways for you to grow. It is possible, in fact, for the gospel to go on advancing even while you are in chains. And so Paul says that he continues to rejoice, and may God help us to do the same in any and all circumstances. May we come to see that in every way God is at work in all things for the good of those who love Him